All right, welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. Can everyone hear me? Just give me a thumbs up. I want to make sure. You guys hear me? All right, cool. So please ensure that you're muted as we are going to go ahead and get started now. It looks like we have a full house on this virtual brunch. We thank you all for spending your Sunday afternoon with us. My name is Demi Fozia Adebo Adelaja. I'm the chair of the AFIA Project Board. Let's get this moving. So before we dive into the program, I would like to cover some housekeeping items. Please ensure once again that your mics are muted. We ask that if you have your camera on, please maintain some decorum because everyone can see you, and we are live streaming this program on Facebook Live. We ask that you please type in your questions in the chat function if you have any questions for us, okay? Again, my name is Demi Fozia Adebo Adelaja, and we are so glad to have you here with us to discuss maternal and child health disparities problem that we are contending with. First, I would like to introduce our organization, the AFIA Project. Well, let's start by asking what's in the name, the AFIA Project. Well, AFIA is an Arabic term that encompasses the well-being of an individual. It includes being in the state of good health, being safeguarded from afflictions, and having adequate sustenance. The AFIA Project is a nonprofit organization formed to address general health disparities experienced by minority members of the Prince George's County community and beyond. We endeavor to make significant contributions to the health, educational advancement, and well-being of our Muslim minority community members through community-based activities and events such as what is to take place here this afternoon. This topic of maternal and child health came about from just 3 mothers, including myself, having a one-off chat about childbirth. The pregnant one amongst us shared how concerned or perhaps even frightened she was about undergoing the labor and delivery process. Even though this would be her 3rd pregnancy. The more we chatted, the more it became clear that this was a topic that truly deserved much more attention than what we currently give to it. So we began brainstorming and planning in mid-July, and here we are today. I would like to introduce you to the moderator for this virtual brunch event. Ramatolai Koker Lanlokun is a public health practitioner with over 10 years of experience in the field. She has worked on a variety of projects that have focused on health disparities and population health, both at the local and international levels. Some of these projects include decreasing SEEDS, that sudden infant death syndrome, in the Black community in Alabama, helping vulnerable communities prepare for a disaster, using electronic health records to address health disparities, and improving population health, and also working on environmental health issues in India. She received her Master of Public Health degree from Morgan State University, a Bachelor of Science in Community Health and Education from Towson University, and currently she is pursuing a degree in nursing from Monroe College. Ramatolai actively participates in various community organizations and is also an entrepreneur. I don't know how she finds time for all that. She started Abiyamo, the meaning of which is motherhood in the Yoruba language. Her business focuses on women's well-being during different phases or stages of pregnancy and postpartum. She currently lives in Brooklyn, New York, with her husband and 2 beautiful daughters actually. Please welcome my dear friend, Ramatolai.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, you were frozen for a bit.
Okay, perfect. My name is Ramatolai Koker, and as Sister Fazia said, I will be your moderator for today. So I will like to begin with explaining a giveaway. So we'll be giving one of our lucky participants an Abiyama Mother Relax box. As she stated, this is my new business venture. And the goal of this box is to center the mother. Not the father, not the baby, but centering the mother throughout different stages of her pregnancy even until she kicks her child out at the age of 18. This particular box is for the mother, the aunt, the grandma, anyone, and the purpose is to solely relax. So by the end of our presentation, a lucky participant will be receiving this box. So today, as Sister Fauzia stated, we'll be talking about maternal health and the Black woman in the United States. We'll be focusing on different aspects of that and what's the next steps. So we're going to begin by debunking the myths. What are the myths that are out there about Black women and maternal health? Why is it that many Black women are dying from during pregnancy and after pregnancy, or why are children dying? Black children are dying during pregnancy. Why do we have high rates of that? We're going to speak on the statistics, your birthing team, birthing options, your birth plan, and how to advocate for yourself. The goal of this of our presentation today is to begin the conversation and to actually develop a solution. The one thing we've noticed in general in our community is that we tend to have the conversation, but we have not figured out the solution. So today, we want to develop that solution together as a community. So, debunking the myths. In the text box, can you guys please tell us what are some of the myths about Black women and maternal health, or Black women in general? And you can type that into the text box. What do you think some of the myths are about Black women and maternal health, or Black women in general? All right, we can handle pain tolerance. Black women are resilient, they are strong. Black women are strong, equipped to take care of our children. You got this. Black women don't feel pain. Powerful women, don't always seek medical attention. She don't need no help. Dramatic. She don't need a man. Difficult. Exaggerating, yes. Our hips are wide enough to deliver the children. I'm loving all of these, and this is all true. We have come up with some of these myths, some of the same things that you said and more. Black women are strong, which is always said. I mean, majority of the comments were strong in pain, that Black women are strong and we can withstand pain. Giving birth is a piece of cake. Many of us know that is not true, that giving birth, it takes a mental and physical toll on you. Black women can take pain. I saw so many of that inside the chat. Motherhood is easy. We all know that's not easy. Many of us are about to experience it in a different level starting September. Educated Black women do not care about their health. And I saw that earlier, that we do not seek medical attention. Uneducated Black women don't care about their health. We hear about that a lot, that uneducated Black women overutilize the system and they're having children because they want to remain on the system. Black women don't know what's good for them, which is so crazy that is a myth, because being strong and taking pain is also a myth. So how do we not know what's good for them? And I think the other issue also is that many of us don't know how to advocate for ourselves very well when we are placed in front of a practitioner. So today, our goal is to talk about every single one of these myths and debunk them. And you're going to hear that throughout our presentation today from all of our wonderful panelists. So we have 4 awesome panelists who are in the field of making sure that Black women are taken care of while giving birth. We have Christina Freilander. She's a certified professional midwife. She graduated from the National Midwifery Institute, and she holds a MA in cultural anthropology from Tulane University. Rosalind Jean Louise, she completed a BSN at Emory University, and she's currently a PhD nursing student at Emory University. Her research topic, the impact of racism and maternal disrespect on adverse maternal outcomes among Black women living in the United States. Munira Fontaine, the founder of Peaceful Earth, Graceful Birth in Washington, D.C. She works as a birth and postpartum doula, a womb healer, and early interventionist. And she's currently a doctoral candidate in special education. And lastly, we have Dr. Rashida McLean Hall. She's a board certified family medicine physician who did her internship as a obstetrics and gynecology at Drexel University and her residency in family medicine at Chestnut Hill Hospital in Philadelphia. So we're going to begin with statistics, and Dr. Rashida will take us through that. Dr. Rashida is a board certified family medicine physician. She completed an internship in obstetrics and gynecology at Drexel University and a family medicine residency at Chestnut Hill Hospital in Philadelphia. She currently works in Western Maryland at a community hospital providing care for a diverse spectrum of acute medical illnesses. She has always had a passion for women's health and has tried to be an advocate for medically underserved populations. Over the years, she has volunteered for various youth organizations as mentor and guide for children and young adults. Her favorite pastime includes finding interesting new places to eat and going on hikes around her community to walk it all off. She lives in Frederick, Maryland with her husband and 4 children. Dr. Rashida?
Assalamu alaikum, bismillah. Thank you so much, Rahmatullah, for that beautiful introduction. And so yes, today my job today is to give the statistics of this. The few words that I would say before this, not uncommon in the news to hear the disparities in various health aspects, and so whether it's COVID-19, yes, it's affecting minorities more, and they seem to be dying more from it, whether it's diabetes or hypertension. The U.S., for all developed countries, already has a not a great track record for as far as maternal health and as far as the birth outcomes compared to other developed nations. And when you come in line with those other disparities that have already exist in the U.S., it's not a surprise that Black women are also being, even at the level of our reproduction, affected by the great, as far as health disparities that women are experiencing in the U.S. And so since 2005, when they really started to do the statistics, the maternal rate of deaths have been worsening. But if you look at this chart here, and it is starting between that range of 2007 and 2008, it's very consistent that the Black women, and particularly American, Indian, and Alaska Native, have been having worse pregnancy-related death outcomes. And this has continued throughout the years, whereas other groups may have had marginal improvement. That has not been the case for those minority groups. And so a lot of the things that are thrown out there, well, is it because of poverty? Is it because of education? Is it, is that the reason why Black women and American Indian and Alaska Natives are having such a difficult time in pregnancy? And that may be some part of it. This chart is showing you that whereas it seems to be protective in other ethnic cultures, it is not so for Black women. So the education and the higher, as far as socioeconomic status, is not protective of us, for us, as it is for other ethnic groups. And another question is, well, is it because are African American women or these populations having births at later ages? So once again, this chart is showing when age is factored in. Yes, there are, in general population for women, as you age, there is a higher risk of pregnancy-related death, but it is disproportionate. It is markedly so for Black women. The disparity is huge. Just the numbers and so this is just the numbers to kind of throw out too, so you can get another idea. So as I said, as a baseline, compared to other developed nations, the U.S. has a worse maternal fetal death rate. And out of every 100,000 women, 11 white women will have a pregnancy-related death. For Hispanics, they actually are doing better, even though there may have been some sort of similarities in their socioeconomical status, but they actually do seem to be better. It's 11 out of that 100,000 women, 11 will have a pregnancy-related death. For Black women, that rate is about 37 women. So that's a huge difference for what Black women are experiencing. So it's disparity between white and Black females. So once again, as I mentioned earlier, this was a headline that came out recently. We just felt like this is just very timely because it's not just even what women are dealing with in pregnancy and in childbirth as far as death. Our babies are also dying. So it's affecting the mothers and the babies. And so this came out August 22 in regards to Black babies are having worse outcomes when cared for by white doctors. Unfortunately, that's what that finding does not compare as far as when Black providers are also taking care of white. So it doesn't cross over in regards to such a cultural thing. And so some of the things that you can say that Black babies will face worse clinical outcomes than white babies. Black babies are more than twice as likely to die in their first year as newborns. And these are some of the numbers, 190 Black deaths versus 490 white deaths per 100,000 births. And Black newborns die 3 times the rate of white babies. So some of the complications that can occur in pregnancy are an increased rates of eclampsia and preeclampsia, preterm delivery, and I'll add a few, placenta abruption and placenta previa. And then once again, in regards to what some of the outrage and says, well, we have to fix this, is, well, let's address the socioeconomic inequalities, which does contribute to some extent, but it doesn't explain, as you saw in the previous slide, that education and higher socioeconomic factors is not protected for Black women and babies. And so the Black-white newborn mortality gap is smaller when Black doctors care for the Black newborns rather than white doctors. So just some of this information that I provided, what's the takeaway? And it's minority women, particularly white, Black, and Native American women, are experiencing morbidity and mortality during pregnancy and childbirth at higher rates compared to their white counterparts. And one thing I would like to say, what was mentioned in that other side is they mentioned preeclampsia, eclampsia, and as I said, previa and placenta abruptions for some of the things that can happen in childbirth to cause maternity death. We're not having it at higher rates. Like, those don't occur at higher rates among Black women. It's just that when we have it, we die 2 or 3 times at a higher rate than the white counterpart. So it's not that we're having this more than white women. It's just that when we do have these conditions, we are more likely to die at 2 or 3 times the rate. So some of the disparities in optimal outcomes remain, even when economic status and education are considered. Where I said education and a higher socioeconomic status does not protect us. And then the proved outcomes exist when obstetrical providers and patients do share the similar ethnic backgrounds. And then as far as some of the articles that I did see, that when Black newborns are taken care of by Black providers, that the death rate had shrunk by 39 and 58%. And that was by another article that was produced in the CNN article. So we already kind of mentioned some of the myths, some of the things that have to be, the education has to be there. And and we have to say what it is. And it is deep rooted in racism in this country in regards to why are we having worse. It has a large encompassing, and it kind of is affecting every aspect of our culture in the sense of how it has affected us in the society. Why would you find that difference? That it's not just poverty and poor education that's making us have these poor outcomes. It's not, and even to the fact that when we are cared for by our own doctors of our similar race, we are having better rates. So that you have to look, you have to mention it. It is there. And so it's not that pain is, we can tolerate pain more. Is someone listening to you when you have your pain? When you tell that provider, I am having a headache, I am having swelling, or are you just being dramatic? And these are the things, the spirals during a woman's pregnancy that can lead to her having an adverse outcome. And so that is for us, the advocacy is to try to improve the conditions or put the things in place. Can we advocate for more minorities in medicine as far as helping education so that we do have more Black physicians or even for Native Americans physicians of their own culture to take care of them? Can we try to reduce the maternity? There is such maternity deserts, whereas when women are, let's say, poor neighborhoods, when they are seeking care, there's not even a lot of providers that can take care of them. Are these some of the things that we can advocate to help us have better outcomes? This should be a joyous and it should be a wonderful time in life, and it should not be one that literally you're putting your life on the line when as far as when pregnancy and reproduction is considered.
All right, we're going to watch a quick video before the next speaker speaks.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Busola, and I want to share my birth stories with you guys. In 2014, I was pregnant. Then I gave birth in 2015 to my son, who is now 4 years old. I gave birth to my son via C-section because the doctor said it put inside of me. The journey for my first pregnancy was good. Everything went on well. I had a smooth journey. Fast forward to 2017, I got pregnant in July. So I couldn't use the same doctor or the same hospital like I did for my first child. I didn't have insurance and I couldn't pay out of pocket. So my friend took me to a place where I could pay per visit. I started seeing this OBGYN at 37 weeks. When I went to see the OBGYN, I discovered that the baby's heartbeat was a bit lower than usual because the baby's heart was always around 160, but this day was 140. But she told me it was okay and that it was still within range, that I could go home and everything was fine. I went the following week, that was 38 weeks, for my routine checkup. And the doctor said she couldn't hear the baby's heartbeat anymore. So I was told to go to the ER. My husband drove me to the ER. When we got to the ER, the doctors there, they tried everything they could to trigger the movement of the baby. Later told me that the baby was dead and they had to remove the baby. So I had to, they had to evacuate the baby through C-section again, though they gave me the option of being induced to bring out the baby, but I didn't want to. The difference between my two pregnancy journeys is that the first pregnancy, I had a lot of support from family and friends. I was even staying with one of my aunts then, so I had some sort of supervision where she would always ask me when I go for appointments, what happened, what did they say, and all. Then, but the second pregnancy, I didn't have that much support. I think it was because people thought, my family or my friends thought that I was new to the business then, and I could handle things. So the support was not much for the second pregnancy. Then what I think I should have done differently was when the doctor told me that the range was okay, maybe I would have read up about it, or I should have asked if I could just stay back a little for her to check me again if the heartbeat was still going down, because one of my aunties said so. That was what she would have done. She would have asked me to stay back for 30 minutes, check again. After 30 minutes, check again. Then if it was normal, then that would have been fine. Instead of telling me to go home, that it was within range. Then some people said, oh, maybe I would have used this hospital. But at that time when I was pregnant, nobody actually told me, oh, what hospital do you want to use? What hospital are you using? And all that. So the support was not as great as my first child. Then I guess everything went that way because I also trusted that doctor knew what she was doing. I trusted the system. That's why then I believed that judgment. But next time, I think I would have asked more questions and do my own findings, but it's okay. I'm okay now. I'm getting better. I'm not totally over it, but I'm getting better. And I thank God for life. Thank you.
We want to thank Sister Busola so much for sharing her story. I know it's definitely not an easy one to share, but Sister Busola did explain that she felt she lost her baby because she lacked support. And she felt that, if she had support, maybe it would be better. And she felt the system also failed her. Sister Munira is going to speak to us now about support and what does that support look like and who's included in your support system. Sister Munira Fontaine, she's the owner of Peaceful Earth, Graceful Birth, and is also a mother of 3. She's currently a doctoral candidate in special education who also works as a birth and postpartum doula, womb healer, and early interventionist. 2020 marks her 12th year of practicing as a birth worker. She has served with several birth organizations, both doula and midwifery, developed doula training curriculums, and taught several other doulas in the process. With her own children, she has experienced a range of births from C-section to home/water birth and wants other people to experience the amazing ability and power of the womb. Birth is one of the few things that affect 100% humans, and she truly believes that everyone deserves a gentle, joyful welcome into the world. Sister Munira.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah. Wow, so I was really taken by Sister Busola's story. Thank you, and thank her for coming forward to share her story. I wish it was a unique story. Unfortunately, in our community, it isn't. But there are things that we can do to change that. So I know it can seem very heavy, a lot of the information that we're receiving, and this is now sort of a very hot topic in the news, and so we're receiving a lot more information about this more regularly. But you can be proactive in terms of choosing who you pick to be on your birthing team, who you choose to be there to support you. So as you see, this slide kind of talks about some of the different things that your birthing team can do for you. Some of those are medical and some of those are non-medical. So when we look at doulas, we do a lot of non-medical support. So that can look like some of these different comfort techniques. So while you're in the middle of labor, massage, giving you encouraging words, holding, I like to say a lot of times we hold the space for you. And so what I mean by that is, anyone who has been through labor knows that it is a journey, it is a marathon, and it is hard work. And so it's very hard to be doing a lot of that internal work and still being aware of everything that's going on around you and being able to advocate for yourself in certain situations because you're in the middle of doing a lot of work. So that's where it's really important, where you are selective and you choose the people that you want to have on your team. Now, sometimes you can't do that as much, right? Because of your insurance. So if you're choosing hospital birth, sometimes depending on your insurance, you don't have as much of a choice. And that's when it's maybe more imperative to bring in other people such as a doula who can kind of advocate and help show you some different things that you can advocate for during the labor process. But it can also be, if you do have choice, right? Don't always just kind of go with the hospital close to you. Look at the stats at the different hospitals. Look at what their C-section rate is. Look at what their VBAC or vaginal birth after cesarean rate is. Look up the doctor or the practice that you're interested in. Is this a practice where it's maybe a single doctor who works with a partner? Is at a really large practice with maybe 8 doctors, where you could have one of any of them at any time. All of these are things that make that can make a huge difference during your labor process, because you might have a really good connection with a particular doctor in a practice, and they might be more in alignment with the way that you want your birth to go. But then during birth, you end up with a completely different doctor who you really didn't make a connection with. You don't feel connected with them, and their priorities are very different than your priorities. So that's where, having a doula come in can be a little bit more helpful. If you're having a home birth, you do get to pick the people that are in your space and your energy a little bit more. So what is a doula? I already said we kind of do a lot of non-medical support. The actual term, a woman who serves, traditionally and historically, a doula was an elder who was well-versed in birth. It was usually a member of the household who attended birth and did a lot of the, the rubbing of the hair, the cooling cloth, a lot of these little soft touches that you don't realize can really make or break a labor, right? A doula is someone that offers continuous physical, emotional, and informational support that starts before you go into labor. So part of our role is to educate you on some different outcomes, different interventions that may come up during labor. So what are some pluses and some minuses, to really come through and discuss with you, like, what is your vision for your birth, right? And how can we then support you in that? Do you want to receive an epidural? Do you want to go all natural? A lot of times, because we've worked, if we've been in an area for a while, we also know a lot about the different practices of the different hospitals and doctors, and can kind of give you some other information about that. There is a little bit of information about some of the positive outcomes of having a doula. It is also important to have other support in the form of family or your partner during labor, but a doula is specifically educated around different interventions. And like I said, a lot of us have experience, so we know a lot more about the inner workings of a hospital. Different hospitals have different philosophies, and they have different environments, some which might be more conducive to what you want to do. So family and friends, though, are very important and essential, in particular your partner. So I know that can be really sensitive because so here it's very normalized at this point for men to be part of the birthing process. It's not that way across cultures. And my own personal feeling is that you really shouldn't force someone into something that they don't feel comfortable with. So you may feel that it's important to have your spouse there to offer support. And when you're touched by someone who you love and who loves you, that releases a lot of oxytocin in your body. And oxytocin is known as the love hormone, and it's what kind of helps keep labor moving forward. So it can be a benefit to have your partner present, to have your partner also be helping to offer you some massage, or just being close to you, talking with you, hugging you, kissing you, offering you support during the labor process. But you also shouldn't feel ashamed if that's not the relationship that you and your partner have. And then there are other ways that you can have your partner involved. I love to send people on errands and to help gather things for the laboring mother. So if she needs water, sending them to get water or to get food and things like that. So involving the partner in ways that they feel comfortable with. It is, okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm just gonna finish that up real quick. And then in terms of woman-to-woman support, sometimes it can be really good to just have, you know, an older sister or your mother present to offer you a certain level of comfort. And also it can just be reassurance, like, my mother went through this with me. She survived and she made it through. I know that I can make it through this, because there are different times in labor that can be hard and difficult, and where you might be reconsidering your initial thoughts. And they also, your family members know you in a certain personalized way that your doula may not know you. Okay. So talking specifically in terms of medical professionals, so for midwives, there are nurse midwives, and then there are also certified professional midwives. Nurse midwives tend to be more, it can really depend on what area you live in, but typically certified nurse midwives practice within the hospital, and certified professional midwives practice do more home birth. So kind of the focus of midwifery is that birth is a natural occurring phenomenon, and they are there as long as as things are progressing well and naturally, then they don't really need to interfere or do much. Then you can also have a medical doctor and OB, which are basically based in the hospital. There are some family physicians who attend births. That's again, this kind of depends on where you are as to what's allowed. And that can really depend state by state. Each state has its own regulations around birth and who can practice and attend birth. And then lastly, just to wrap up really briefly, postpartum support is not talked about enough. It is extremely important for women to receive postpartum support. Often what happens is everyone comes in and swoops around and gives a whole bunch of help right when the baby first comes. And then a couple of weeks out, everyone's gone. And it's like, ooh, wait, what happened? The floor just came out from underneath of me. How am I gonna manage this baby whose every need is focused on me? So you can get a postpartum doula for breastfeeding. There is lactation support. And then if you're having any concerns, if you're experiencing concerns, if something doesn't seem quite right postpartum, then definitely check back in with your medical professional.
Thank you so much, Sister Manira. Thank you. So we'll be showing another video right before our next speaker.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aziza Adu. I'm a mother of two and will be expecting baby number 3 in a few weeks, inshallah. I'm going to first start off by describing my experience with pregnancy. It's interesting because I have more anxiety about labor and delivery with my current pregnancy than I did with my first and second. To provide some context, I'll speak briefly about each pregnancy and how this anxiety developed. Back in 2008, I was diagnosed with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And at first, I really didn't think much about it until I got married and my husband and I started family planning. I was reminded of this PCOS when I went in for my first appointment to see the doctor and was told that it was going to be very difficult for me to give birth. I was very concerned and worried. And as a result, asked all of my relatives and friends if they knew what it was and what was their experience with it. And to my surprise, it was something that was very common. It's actually very common amongst African-American women. When I went back for my second appointment, the doctor prescribed me a week-long medication to help me ovulate. And within a month or so, I got pregnant, alhamdulillah. The pregnancy was very smooth sailing with the exception of nausea and vomiting. I didn't really experience any trauma during the pregnancy. A week or two into my third trimester, though, my husband and I moved from Philadelphia to Maryland, and I soon had to quickly find an OBGYN, to become really familiar with and to help me through the labor and delivery process. After speaking to a few friends, I was referred to Dr. Mahalati, who didn't practice too far from where we had lived at the time in Maryland. When I first met her, I fell in love with her immediately. She wanted to learn about my religious beliefs. And to my surprise, I learned that she comes from a Muslim background. So she was very well aware of how I felt about having a woman doctor present to deliver my child. She also wanted to learn more about my culture. We had conversations around concerns I had about, any hesitations or doubts or concerns I had around labor and delivery. She gave me a list of risks and benefits of things that I had concerns about. And she was just an easy person to talk to. When I went into labor, I went to Lower Regional Hospital, which was a hospital that I was familiar with because my doctor had months before my labor suggested that we do birthing classes at the hospital. So I did birthing classes there. I also did a tour of the hospital. So I just felt very comfortable there. When I went into labor at Lower Regional Hospital, it just felt like family. It felt like a familiar place. My husband and I still joke around today about how many of the nurses there felt like aunties. They were very supportive. They took care of us and were there to answer any questions that we had. When I went into labor, my doctor was present and, delivered the baby. And alhamdulillah, everything went smoothly. My fear around labor didn't happen until after the birth of my second born. Unlike my first child, I gave birth to my second child at Holy Cross, which was a hospital that I wasn't too familiar with. My experience there was horrible. The anesthesiologist pricked me 3 times. It was so bad that months after the pregnancy, I had excruciating back pain. I was told hours within my labor that my doctor wasn't going to be on call and that a male was going to be there to help deliver the baby. They didn't at all consider the fact that I was a Muslim woman, didn't care to ask what was my, what were my religious needs. I was also told that that my daughter's shoulder was very broad and that there was a huge possibility of me having a C-section, which is something that I just wasn't prepared for and it wasn't in my birthing plan. My husband and I, being so worried, asked if they could get my doctor on the phone. And my doctor, because we had a good relationship at that time, we knew, she was very well aware of my needs, came to the hospital to deliver my child, made no mention of the C-section. She, however, did say that she was going to use a different technique to help deliver the baby so that the baby's broad shoulders wouldn't, so that it wouldn't fracture my pelvic, nor would it fracture the baby's shoulders. And alhamdulillah, the pregnancy, the labor went very well, but I still had anxiety and worries and concerns after that pregnancy, after that labor and delivery. Now that I'm pregnant with baby number 3, I have so many worries. I worry that my doctor, who I have such a really good relationship with, won't be present to advocate for me and my needs. I worry that I maybe, get pricked and probed the way I was pricked and probed with my second born. I worry that I'll just be seen as another patient, that my birthing plan, my religious beliefs and wants and needs won't be considered.
Sister Christina Freilander is a certified professional midwife and New Jersey licensed midwife with an independent home birth practice serving central New Jersey through Philadelphia. She is one of 4 midwives participating in the Philly Birth Fund, a project which directs crowdsourced funds to families of color in the greater Philadelphia area, enabling them to access home birth and midwifery services. Christina is a graduate of the National Midwifery Institute and holds an MA in Cultural Anthropology from Tulane University. Christina.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound perfect.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Afia Foundation. I'm really humbled to be included in this group of amazing women. And thank you to all the speakers. And yes, I'm making dua for your friend as well, because her story is so familiar to me from stories that I've heard from other women. And then there are some aspects of it where I'm just like raising my eyebrows about like the broad shoulders, and like, this is a woman who had a baby. Like she had a vaginal birth. When I hear stuff like that, like, so I could go down a rabbit hole there. But anyways, one thing that really stands out to me about that story, and which kind of like leads into what I want to say, is that in every setting where we are engaged with a medical care provider, there is a power dynamic. And, it's important to recognize how power plays out in those environments, because it can either be, traumatizing, it can be empowering. When you have a provider who listens to you and respects you and cares about what you care about, that's a very different experience from, going into a setting where, even if legally you technically have power is being sort of enacted in a very different way. And in those cases, people can be forced into things that they don't want, or in that case, this idea that, your provider can place a lot of anxiety in your heart by suggesting these things that may or may not be true. So as I get into options, I want to kind of like lay the groundwork and kind of pick up on some of the things that Sister Munira had mentioned around, like, there are different kinds of providers. Not only are there different kinds of providers, but there are different models of care and different paradigms. So I, as a CPM, as a certified professional midwife, I'm trained specifically for out-of-hospital birth. So that includes birth centers that are independent from hospitals and also home birth. So I follow a different model of care. So there's the midwifery model of care, which is sort of looking at pregnancy, birth, preconception, pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum as physiological events that happen in women's bodies that we can do, that happen naturally in our bodies, and that there's a kind of a broad range of normal for. And so, the way that we approach it is by seeing it as a normal process, we are there to support what is normal. And as things kind of move outside of the range of normal, to nudge them back in. So for example, in my practice, I do that with food, I do that with herbs, I do that with supplements, and kind of like moving along the scale until people move out of, with, let's say, like food changes are on one end and surgery is on the far extreme. So the obstetric model of care, the midwifery, or the medical model of care tends to see, to view them as inherently risky processes. And so that way, there might be more of a focus on like what could go wrong, where is the risk? And with that, there may be more sort of like active management of that process to reduce risk or to kind of manage what the perceived risk is. So that might be, you're of a certain age, therefore you need to induce, that it's sort of like, it follows this sense where people are not necessarily seen as individuals, but they're seen as like falling into certain risk categories. And that may be a totally appropriate model of care for a particular person, whereas the other model of care might be totally appropriate for somebody else. So for example, if somebody has what we think of as like a low risk pregnancy, a healthy pregnancy, everything is going perfectly normally, baby is head down, like everything is like lining up. That person would be very appropriate for example, like for midwifery care, whether it's in the hospital, perhaps also outside of the hospital, if that was something that they were drawn to. And depending on what their expectations are for their own birth, they might feel really surprised by a more kind of managed style of care if they've been told their whole pregnancy, like, oh, everything's great, everything's normal. So building on that, there are two different management styles. So I mentioned active management is more kind of like proactive around assessing and managing like risk in pregnancy and birth. So active management might be like, okay, you're in labor, let's speed things up. We're going to break your water, and that's going to make your labor go faster. Whereas expectant management of care, which is sort of like more common in the way I practice and the way other midwives practice, is that we kind of, as long as things are normal, we want to support what's normal and let that play out. And then only kind of like shift how we intervene if it's called for. So I mention all of this to kind of like pull back the curtain a little bit. And, you know, again, like building on what Munira said, that when you are looking for a care provider, it's definitely not just, you know, who's the closest. And it might not be like, sometimes I have Muslim women who ask me for like, oh, do you know a Muslim OB in this particular area? Maybe there is one. Whether or not that's the right person for you, depending on what it is that you are seeking, what your expectations are, what your health status is, you know, that may be a good person, maybe not. It's not their identity as being Muslim is not the only kind of the way to approach whether they're the right fit for you. So I also want to mention that the rules, laws, and protocols that govern a particular practice, as Munira mentioned, are vary by state. They vary by provider type. So for example, I, in the state of New Jersey, am not allowed legally to do VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean, at home. I was able to do it when I was licensed in New Hampshire. Midwives in Philly do it, but in New Jersey, I'm not allowed to. So they vary by state. Different kinds of services will vary by hospital. So for example, like you see water birth on there, some hospitals may offer it, some may not. You might find like a home birth provider will offer it, but you know, your like local practice in the hospital will not. So things will vary by practice, vary by hospital. The rates of intervention vary by hospital. And one resource that I'll mention around this is a website called the Leapfrog Data Group. That's one that I like a lot because you can go in and you can actually see what is the C-section rate at a particular hospital, what is the VBAC rate. And you know, when I was a doula for a very long time, and when I talk to my clients about figuring out do they feel comfortable with their provider, I actually have them like, you know, there's a lot of talk, like, you know, providers can like talk the talk, but like look at their numbers, because if they don't walk the walk too, then what does that mean for you going into that environment? So it's called, the Leapfrog Data Group. So look at their numbers, find out, you know, does the hospital do VBAC, which even if you are not having a VBAC and if you're not planning a VBAC, I personally find VBAC data to be very informative, because how committed is that hospital, is that particular practice to vaginal birth? Because whether or not somebody, I mean, it really speaks about more than just like VBAC itself. You know, are they committed to reducing primary cesareans? What is their episiotomy rate? You know, if you don't know what an episiotomy is, it's a cut that's made on like the woman's perineum as the baby's being born. And that has not been shown to be particularly beneficial. And so is this a practice that is still engaging in that intervention, or have they phased it out? You know, every practice is going to have their unique stats, every provider. And if they don't disclose it, that is a red flag to me. I would not feel comfortable with a provider who did not feel proud of their low intervention rates or their low C-section rates. And obviously different practices are going to be different. Some, you know, large teaching hospitals are going to have a lot higher of a C-section rate because they're going to see sort of like more complicated or high-risk pregnancies versus, you know, a different hospital that just sees a different population. So, you know, so those are some of the things to think about. You know, I think it's also important just in terms of talking about like home birth midwifery that, you know, there are real issues around Yes, evidence-based birth. Excellent, excellent resource. Thank you, Munira. There are real issues around access and equity in terms of, finding a provider that like looks like you, who understands you, who will listen to you. And so sort of speaking directly to like my profession, that we absolutely need more midwives of color, and we're really struggling right now with the as sort of like every field is struggling around like racism and anti-racism. But ask around and you will find the people are there. The midwives are there, especially in kind of like larger cities, not so necessarily so much like outside of cities, but I know in like the DC, Philly, New Jersey, New York area, we're really building a very interesting cohort of midwives. All right, so in terms of what a birth plan is and birthing options, I like to approach it as like birth preferences more than like plans. And I would use a birth plan as a starting point for research, researching our options. If you don't know what your options are, you don't have any options. So find out what your options are. There are lots of plans online. Talk to your doula, have them work with you to craft a plan, and then use the plan as like talking points with your provider. Find out like, okay, so for example, delayed cord clamping. In the hospital setting, this has not been a very common practice for a long time, but delayed cord clamping essentially like gives more time for the baby's blood to move from the placenta into the baby. We now know that it's beneficial. I mean, like midwives have known for a long time that it's beneficial, doulas have known. But now, now even like some of the major obstetric and gynecological organizations have come out saying that it shows benefit. So, is that something that your provider supports? Is that something that they're aware of? Do they have accurate information about it? Because I've heard OBs say some really bizarre things about cord clamping, which are not true. So, these are ways that you can kind of like assess your provider, like suss them out, to see like, are you on the same page with them? Are they on the same page with you? And if they're not, will they respect your choices anyways? Will they respect your preferences anyways? That's really important. Find out about what are the options for pain management. Find out, what are can you labor at home for as long as possible before you go into the hospital? What are you able to get up and move? And I'll just kind of end with this, two things. One's just, and come up with like plan A, plan B, and plan C. What are your preferences if you have like just like a straightforward vaginal birth? Let's say, if plans had to change and you needed a C-section, what are the options available for you for a C-section? Know what they are so that if like your plan goes a completely different direction, you still have agency and you still have choices and you still have support that can be built into that. And then the last thing is this acronym BRAIN, which is benefits, risks, alternatives. Oh, what's I? Oh, intuition. And then N is nothing. So, anytime that you are thinking about any kind of like intervention, what are the benefits of that? What are the risks of that? This is the conversation that you should have with your provider in pregnancy, and then also have this during labor. What are the alternatives? What if I just wait? What if I, instead of taking like a iron supplement, how can I change things in my diet? What does your gut tell you? What does your intuition tell you? Because that's real. And then what happens if you do nothing? What happens if you do decide, okay, I'm gonna, for example, in labor, I'm fine, baby's fine. Okay, I'm gonna wait 2 hours, and then we can revisit this conversation. These are all things that are really helpful when you have a doula who can help you to like craft the questions and build into that space. But even so, like these are the those are the kinds of questions that you can be asking throughout pregnancy and labor, postpartum, all the interventions that are offered for your baby. That's kind of like the mindset you need to have to be proactive, build your agency, guard your agency, and exercise it.
Thank you so much, Sister Christina. That was extremely powerful. I'm a mother of two, and I just learned something new today from Sister Christina. That was amazing. And Sister Christina, do you mind writing that acronym again in the chat for everybody? Thank you. So Sister Christina mentioned VBAC a couple of times during her presentation. So we're going to have a short video on VBAC. So we'll start that now.
Welcome. I am Dr. Muslima Ali, and I'm going to be sharing with you my birth stories. I am a mom of 4. Alhamdulillah, I have had 4 pregnancies and 4 healthy deliveries. I'm just going to start at the beginning with my first pregnancy. My first pregnancy was an exciting experience, like most people who are really looking forward to being pregnant and being a mom. I was in the care of some OBGYNs, and I was going through the rotation, seeing the different providers so that I can get familiar with them. My husband and I had moved from Maryland to Virginia, and we were still going to Maryland to see these providers because I'd been seeing them prior to for my well women's visits. And we watched The Business of Being Born, which is a documentary by Ricky Lake about the cascade of events that can lead to unnecessary cesarean sections and how the rate of cesarean sections is just ridiculously high here in the United States. So we watched that, and then we were like, oh no, we're not doing that. We're going to switch to midwives and have like a birth center birth or a home birth. So we switched to a group of midwives, and we were aiming for a birth center birth. And I switched around my somewhere between 20, 23, 24 weeks, something like that. So I'm going to this practice, and in the group of midwives, there's one Black midwife. So I'm seeing a lot of the other women, and at this time, I'm starting to gain a lot of weight and kind of achy, a rapid weight really, really fast and not feeling so great. And so I'm mentioning to this as I'm seeing them, and they're just kind of brushing it off like, oh, don't focus so much on the weight. So finally, somewhere around 32 weeks, I see the Black midwife, and I mentioned it to her, and she was like, okay, let's take a look. And so I do this 24-hour urine collection, and sure enough, it comes back, my protein levels are high, and I have preeclampsia. So the Monday after my baby shower, I go to the hospital, check into the hospital, and actually it was Sunday, I check into the hospital, and I don't leave. And the following Sunday, we give birth. I give birth to our first child via emergency cesarean section. She was premature. She stayed in NICU for 16 days. Alhamdulillah, she came home. She's fine. The second birth was, I went with a group of midwives again because I was like, oh, I really want to attempt a vaginal birth after having the cesarean. So I went with the group of midwives. I had a doula. Also had a doula, and I took Bradley classes for the first birth as well. Bradley is more of a natural based childbirthing class, teaching you how to really learn about your body and understand the process of giving birth and to give birth successfully. So the second pregnancy, I had all of that, and I think I just panicked at the last minute. So I went to a hospital and went too early. They were like, you had a cesarean, we'll do another one. So they did another cesarean. For my third pregnancy, I was like, I am tired of being cut. I don't like the idea that it's a surgery, and then after surgery, you're expected to not only heal from a massive surgery, but then also take care of somebody who's totally dependent on you. It's a lot of work, and it was a lot of stress, quite frankly. So I searched high and low, because at this point now I've had 2 cesareans, to try to find another midwife who would be willing to take me on as a client. And I was just like, I'm not even going to the hospital. I'm just going to do the birth at home. And so that's what we did. We found a midwife an hour away. So we would drive almost an hour to these appointments. They took me on as a client. Once again, I had my doula, did my childbirthing classes. I went to chiropractic care this pregnancy, my third pregnancy. And alhamdulillah, I had a successful home birth. It was the most amazing experience. I felt so empowered. I felt like I really advocated for myself. I was very vigilant on staying on top of my health, and just really felt very confident in what I could do. And so my fourth pregnancy went the same route for a home birth. And this time around, a little bit familiar of knowing what to do. And so, alhamdulillah, we had a successful home birth pregnancy for the second one as well. I think my lessons learned are really just to advocate for yourself when you know something is wrong. They kind of brushed me off in the beginning. I had preeclampsia, and I've continuously had slightly elevated blood pressures, but the range of what midwives do and their care, or their range of normal is this wide, whereas OBGYN, your range of normal is this wide. So anything that's not in the normal range, outlier, cascade of events. Not only that, but then my mode of care with the midwives were things that were preventative to help prevent me from developing preeclampsia in the first place. And some of those things I think were also helpful. In addition to that, I just felt like they cared about me and they were willing to listen and willing to learn. And we worked as partners in my care, as opposed to them just kind of dictating and telling me what to do. Because for my fourth pregnancy, I actually had parallel care, which means I had an OBGYN that I was seeing and then a midwife, and the way that I was treated was vastly different, tell me what to do with my fourth child. And that's not to say that you can have 4 children and still not understand the birthing process, still not understand pregnancy, but that wasn't the case with me versus the midwife who took me for what I knew. And then we worked together to birth my fourth baby, our fourth child. So that's my story. I'm willing to share and talk to anyone who wants to talk more about home births, and particularly home births after cesarean.
That was amazing. To understand the importance of advocating for yourself. Sister Christina alluded to that also during her presentation, of the importance of understanding what is best for you. And when you advocate for yourself, things do turn out differently. Sister Muslima actually had all the resources. She did everything. She had a birthing class, a doula, but she was missing the advocacy that she found with her third and fourth pregnancy. So Sister Rosaline Jean Louise is now going to talk about how to advocate for yourself. She's a single mother of 4 and a PhD student at Emory University of Nursing. In her time as a labor and delivery nurse at multiple hospitals across the greater Atlanta area, she noticed stark differences in how Black women, especially those who were perceived to be lower economic status, were treated compared to their white counterparts. This led to her to pursue her PhD to study the ways in which racial discrimination and maternal disrespect perpetrated by medical providers impacts maternal health outcomes among Black women. She hopes to shed light on the racial inequalities that plague Black women and help implement programs and policies to improve health outcomes for Black women. Sister Rose?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that intro. I think I'm going to start my presentation off by just making sure you guys are paying attention to the things that are constantly being repeated over and over again. I did not have access to everybody else's talking points necessarily, and neither did the rest of us. So the fact that we all keep repeating kind of the same things should show you how important that thing that we're repeating is. All right, so what I'll start off with is making clear and reminding you guys of all of 2 things. First, you may not know all there is to know about pregnancy, labor, postpartum care, but when it comes to your body, you are the expert and you know when something is not feeling right. You may not be able to pinpoint it, you may not even be able to articulate it, but when something is off, and you are the expert when it comes to your body. This brings me to my second point: trust yourself. If you feel like something isn't right, pursue that until you feel right about it. Allah gave us intuition for a purpose. Use it and trust your gut. Button slide 2, please. Next slide. All right, so now I'll go through some things that you can do to be able to advocate for yourself. Because this is an overview and I only have 10 minutes, this won't be a deep dive into these topics, but this information should definitely give you direction as to what you need to start thinking about. The first point is something that we should all do, whether we're pregnant or not. Know your own and know your family's medical history, both physical and mental health history. A lot of what happens in your pregnancy is dictated by your health history, and without that knowledge, you're kind of flying blind. So talk to your mother, talk to your father, talk to your grandparents, ask them about their reproductive years, what diseases run in your family, and look for trends. And the second point is so important, and I cannot stress this enough: research your health provider. Set appointments to speak with them with the purpose of interviewing them. Find out how they view shared decision making. If a natural birth is important to you, make sure they feel the same way. If you're more of a, I don't want to feel a thing, give me all the meds, and make sure they're okay with that too. Make an attempt to find a provider that shares your own race, because as some other speakers have said today, studies are showing that patients who have providers that share their race have better health outcomes. Also do some research about the hospital that you're going to be delivering at. It's a little harder to gain objective information about this, but ask your doctor about the nurses at the hospital. She works with them all the time. She knows them. You can even go as far as asking the provider to give you a few names of both day and night shift nurses that you can request when you go to deliver. Nurses absolutely love to be requested, and that will kind of set the tone for your delivery, as far as the nurse is concerned. Ask your friends about their experiences at different hospitals. Do some digging with the resources that were shared today. Find out what their C-section rate is. Even though your doctor may not be pro C-section, if your nurses or the culture on the unit is, you could easily be pushed in that direction. This will also help you in making a decision about choosing your provider, because the one you choose will likely only have privileges at 1 or 2 hospitals at best. All right, next slide. All right, so knowledge is power. Make an attempt to learn as much as you can about the pregnancy, labor, and postpartum period. If you do not know what is normal, how are you going to know that what you're experiencing is not normal? As far as what you should learn, tailor this plan to your issues. If you know that high blood pressure runs in your family, pay attention to that. If you know that your family has very large babies, that may mean that you need to be a bit more aware of your diet and watch out for gestational diabetes. Please understand the signs of preeclampsia and know when to call your provider. Know your normal blood pressure, and if you can, buy a blood pressure cuff and learn how to take your own. I know I said I wasn't going to go into detail for the sake of time, but this is so important. Although research shows that Black women don't develop preeclampsia at higher rates than white women, when we develop, like the other speaker said, we die from it. So you need to be more diligent in watching out for symptoms. And here are some symptoms for you to watch out for: blurred vision, headache, nausea, swelling in your arms and legs, weight gain, and fatigue. If you experience any of these symptoms, call your provider and insist on being seen. If they won't see you, find another provider. Know the signs of preterm birth. In the United States, the preterm birth rate for African American women is 48% higher than all the other races. And research is now pointing to the fact that we face like this consistent, relentless racism that we are always dealing with, even if it's not right in our faces, as a reason for this. Like biologically, it's causing changes in us that's causing preterm birth. So some signs of preterm birth to watch out for are changing your vaginal discharge or more vaginal discharge than usual, pressure in your pelvis or lower belly, like your baby's pushing down, a constant low, dull backache, belly cramps with or without diarrhea, regular or frequent contractions that make your belly tighten like a fist. These contractions may or may not be painful. And of course, if your water breaks, you need to be calling someone immediately. If you experience any of these things, call your provider. Do not wait till the morning. Insist on being seen that day. And the last one on this slide is a reminder to write things down. Pregnancy brain is real. You will not remember what questions you had to ask your provider when you are under pressure at a visit. Also, keep track of your medical records. Know and understand your lab and ultrasound results. Ask your provider with help with this. Make sure that they're answering you in layman's terms. If you don't understand the medical jargon, tell them to break it down. All right, next slide. Okay, know that you can change providers. If you feel like the one is that you have isn't listening to you or isn't taking you seriously, or you just don't like them, switch. The worst thing you can do is have a provider that you don't trust or you feel like doesn't trust you. This also goes for your care in the hospital if you decide to go that route. If you have a nurse that is not treating you the way you like, call a charge nurse and have them give you a different nurse. Obviously, you want to be polite because all of the nurses on the unit are friends. But in general, when a medical provider knows that you are not afraid to stand up for yourself respectfully, they respect you and they're very careful with your care. Even if they're annoyed, they're going to pay attention. So I'm going to switch things a little bit up and talk about the birth plan first. Make a birth plan in advance. And when I say advance, I'm talking 6 months, like month 6 at the latest. Why? Because 1, preterm birth is a possibility and you don't want to go in there unprepared. God forbid that happens. And 2, and you need time to edit this and as you learn when you're talking to your providers about this plan. Also, and this is a caveat for me as a nurse in the hospital, please know that your birth plan is a guide. It is not a holy book. There are very few labors that are going to go as planned 100%. When you make the plan, having in your mind flexibility. For example, you may want a water birth, but if your baby isn't behaving during labor, you may need to be satisfied with taking a shower intermittently. No matter how perfect your plan is, your baby is in control during that birth, not you. And then I'll go back to the second point. When you have this plan written down, prep your birth team. Make sure they know your wishes and your plans. Make sure they know how flexible you are with each point. And make sure you are choosing people that aren't afraid to advocate for you. When you're in that room delivering, whether it's in a hospital or anywhere else, it's very difficult for you to kind of advocate for yourself because there's a lot of other things you're contending with biologically. So make sure that you have people in there that are not afraid to respectfully stand up for you. Needless to say, that means have a plan to have a team. You are going to need the support. Your nurse and your provider are there for your medical care. Although they try to be there for you for labor support, it's very unlikely that you will be their only patient. You're going to need help, and I highly, highly recommend having a doula. All right, next slide. All right, so moving on to after you've delivered. Try to learn all that you can about the postpartum period. The majority of pregnancy-related deaths happen during this time. Learn what is normal bleeding and what's excessive. Be aware of your mental health. Know the difference between having the normal baby blues and when it may be crossing over to something significantly more than that. We call pregnancy the window to the heart because of the excess blood flow that occurs during pregnancy. So a lot of underlying health issues show their faces during pregnancy and the year after. So learn about heart health, what's normal, what's not normal. Especially pay attention to swelling during pregnancy and after. Again, know when to call your doctor. All right, and then point two, please try to set up a support system for your postpartum period. This has been mentioned twice already. Black women are notorious for believing that we're good, we're strong, we can do this alone. I need probably literally an entire lecture series to go into why that is, but it's not true. You're not good. You should not be doing this alone. You need help. So to the best of your ability, have someone with you for as long as possible during the postpartum period. If you can have someone stay with you for a month, 3 months even, please do. Also, make sure you teach that support crew what to look out for as well, because you're tired, that baby brain fog is real, and sometimes it's hard to kind of even notice that you're dealing with certain things. So having someone there to be like, hey, I noticed you're having a hard time sleeping, you seem to be crying a lot, maybe we should talk to somebody about this, it's really important. And I'll close the same way I began. Who is the expert here? That's you. Who do you trust? Again, that is you. You know your body best, and please follow your gut. All right, thank you, and I hope that was helpful.
Sister Rose, that was beyond helpful. That was amazing. And the points that Sister Rose gave, as she stated in the very beginning, this is not only for a pregnant woman, this is for women, period. Understanding you are your expert and you should trust yourself. I mean, it's a very, very strong message. Honestly, if you can put that on your, whatever you use whenever you go to the doctor, put that on the front cover as your motto whenever you sit down with the doctor. So now we're gonna have another video from a sister who is gonna speak on how her advocacy really, really helped her out during her pregnancy.
Our dreams turned into a nightmare though. And so I had to write everything down and remember as much as I could. So please bear with my reading. My pregnancy was very uneventful despite it being high risk. My health actually improved during the pregnancy, which was really great. About 2 weeks before my due date, my husband and I went in for a routine sonogram, and we were told that I would need to be admitted to the hospital because my fluids were 0.1 points below the normal level. Looking back now, I wish we'd just ignored the recommendation from the radiology technician. And I actually remember my husband saying, 0.1 points isn't really significant, but okay, let's go have the baby. And so we decided to trust the system. When we were told that my labor would be induced, we were nervous but excited to finally meet our baby. Our dreams turned into a nightmare though, and for a long time, we lost faith in the American healthcare system. My husband's close friend, who is an OBGYN, was visiting us from Nigeria, and we had actually invited him to come and be with us through the labor and delivery process. I remember at the end of it, he exclaimed that what he witnessed was actually worse than anything he'd ever seen in Nigeria, which is a lot to say. I was induced. I was in induced labor from early afternoon on Friday, and I didn't have the baby via C-section until 9:30 p.m. on Sunday, almost 3 full days. I felt like a guinea pig the entire time, and I didn't feel any better the 7 days I stayed in the hospital afterwards. The doctors tried pretty much every method to dilate my cervix, and none of them got me more than 5 centimeters dilated. About 24 hours into the ordeal, I agreed to get an epidural. It seemed to work for a while, and suddenly at one point, when I was on the highest levels of Pitocin, the contraction monitors were just moving erratically. Suddenly I was in an unbelievable amount of pain. I could feel it all, and it was not a good feeling. I told the anesthesiologist that I could feel the pain despite the epidural, and she looked at me skeptically, told me that I shouldn't feel anything and that the medicine was working, and then she left. She returned 3 hours later to discover that I had been right all along and that the epidural had been empty for several hours. The doctors finally decided that breaking my waters would help move the labor along. While trying to do this, the nurse actually cut her finger while it was inside my body, while she was trying to break the water with a tool. We ended up having to both get tested for blood-borne diseases to make sure there was no transference. And the most embarrassing part of it for me was that they told me that we would need to get tested to make sure that I didn't pass anything to the nurse and not that she could have passed something over to me. And so that was pretty embarrassing for me. By that point, I was at my wit's end and pretty much cursed out one of the senior attendings. She argued with me that they were doing their best, and then she walked out. She was unbelievably arrogant and disdainful, and it was at this point that we began to wonder whether our race played a factor in my treatment. I was miserable and in pain for many more hours after that. From what I was told, once the waters were broken, a 24-hour clock should have been started. If I couldn't deliver the baby by that time, I should have been taken in for an emergency C-section, but that didn't happen. It took well over 24 hours, almost a day and a half, before one of the heads of the department came to the room and told me in a straightforward manner that she would need to perform surgery if we didn't make any more progress in a given number of hours. And that that was the first time that someone had actually been straightforward with us instead of running around in circles about what was going on and giving us vague answers. I eventually had to go in for the C-section because the baby was in distress. Even with the surgery, the epidural didn't seem to work because I could feel every single cut, hug, and pull as they were trying to open me up. They eventually had to, it was just so unbearable. On November 26th, though, we had a healthy baby boy, and aside from a cone-shaped head that thankfully went away, you would have never known that he was under distress. He actually had an APGAR score of 9/10. I, on the other hand, ended up in pretty bad shape. My baby and I were in the hospital for 7 more days after delivery. My health actually declined so badly that I remember having convulsions at one point and screaming that I wasn't ready to die. I also had issues with milk production because of the stress and the medication that I was given. One doctor told me I couldn't feed my baby the breast milk because of the medications. This discouraged me from even wanting to milk, especially knowing that it would be torn from me. The baby was technically discharged after the 3rd day because he was healthy. And this made things worse because it meant that the hospital could no longer provide us with donor breast milk since he was technically no longer their patient. He had to stay with me in the hospital, but he wasn't under their care anymore. And that further added to my stress and feeling like there was no advocacy for me. What hurt me the most is that a lactation specialist actually came to see me a couple of days later and informed me that I could have actually given my baby the milk all along. He wouldn't have been affected by the medications. And so I was very disappointed. Um, my breastfeeding journey was a difficult one after that, but I'm happy to thank God that I was able to breastfeed my son until he turned 2. While in the hospital, though, I was bleeding so heavily and I was passing blood clots the size of a grown man's fist. The doctor suspected it was a uterine infection, most likely from their waiting too long after breaking my waters to go into surgery, or because somebody cut their finger while inside of me. This was very alarming, and despite this, they didn't want to do any scans because it wasn't part of the protocol. After several days of requesting for a sonogram to no avail, my husband, who is a radiologist in Nigeria, put his foot down and angrily demanded that they complete a sonogram. Instead, they did a CT scan. In trying to interpret the CT scan, though, they were confused by the images and finally decided that they did need to do a sonogram, after all, to clarify their confusion. What they failed to realize was that my husband was, in a way, my personal doctor. He understands my gynecological history, and he was actually the first person to confirm my pregnancy via ultrasound. He performed the ultrasound himself. The radiologist who reviewed the sonogram told me that my ovary was twisted, something called an ovarian torsion, and that it doesn't look like I have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, as indicated by my medical history. I told her I had been diagnosed when I was 19 and that I had even lost an ovary and fallopian tube because of it. She insisted that she didn't see any signs of it, despite my husband pointing out some cysts on the scan that we were all looking at. Despite this, she still made the recommendation for exploratory surgery to figure out.
Thank you.
This would mean that I would have a second major surgery within a few days of the C-section. Literally, as I was wheeled back to my room from the sonogram, someone was already waiting to wheel me to the operating room to perform the recommended surgery. Reassured by our understanding and position of the issue, my husband put his foot down once again and demanded for a second and third opinion from my primary OBGYN and a different radiologist. We got the second opinion and the third opinion, and it turned out that he had been right all along. I didn't need surgery, just close monitoring. We have no doubt that if I had been taken into that OR, I would have lost my remaining ovary and fallopian tube. Most women who go through similar experiences aren't so lucky. They don't have 2 doctors, my husband and his friend, in the room advocating for them. And it's unfortunate because they then end up in a much worse state without realizing that they could have been helped. So at the end, or towards the end of the ordeal, we made a formal complaint and got an apology from the department chair, but only after I had called my boss to report the issue. My boss at that time was on the leadership team of the medical center. Unfortunately, most women, again, don't have such connections. The doctor I cursed out earlier, she ended up being assigned to perform my son's circumcision. And before she started the procedure, we tried to discuss with her to find out what went wrong. And she still stood her ground and insisted that she'd been following protocol and studies that supported the way she managed my labor. It was at that point that we refused to let her perform the circumcision, and she never apologized. Nowadays, I always recommend a doula or some other type of advocate to anyone who's pregnant so that they don't go through what I did. At the end of it all, I eventually healed enough to go home, and almost 3 years later, in a way, I'm still recovering.
So Adara is also my friend, a very close friend of mine, and hearing her retell her story was very, very hard to re-listen to this. But the one thing I would say is that as a friend, she was able to share her story and started teaching the rest of us in our friend group, the importance of us advocating for ourselves. She's the reason why I was able to breastfeed my second daughter by breast because of her, because I didn't understand to advocate for myself with my first daughter, and I pumped exclusively with her. So Adderall, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and understand, and all of us understand the importance of us, again, advocating for ourselves, pregnant or not. It's really, really important that we advocate for ourselves. When we advocate and having support, when we are there in front of these medical professionals. So we are now going to break out into groups with Sister Crystal, Christine, sorry, Sister Rashida, Sister Munira, and Sister Rose, where we are going to now sit down and discuss different phases of pregnancy and understand how do we even begin advocating for ourselves during these phases. So Dr. Rashida is going to speak about the preconception phase. And as he said, spoke about being diagnosed with PCOS in 2009, and in 2015 being able to give birth to her son. But this all happened during her preconception phase. So Sister Rashida is going to explain how to advocate for yourself during that phase. And you can ask her questions about like different questions during that phase. Sister Crystal is going to speak on the conception phase. What are your prenatal care options? We spoke about having a birth plan. We spoke about if you decide to have a VBAC, if you decide to have a water birth, understanding when do you start speaking up about these options, during what time of your pregnancy. Sister Munira is going to speak about changes in your body. Earlier, we spoke about preeclampsia, and one of the symptoms was swollen feet. Understanding if your foot's swollen, what exactly does that mean? Do I call my doctor because my feet starts to swell? And Sister Rose is going to speak on your postpartum care. And as I stated earlier, a lot of stuff I'm learning as a second-time mom. I'm learning even though I have 2 children already during this presentation. And Sister Rose emphasized the important, actually, all of our panelists emphasize the importance of postpartum care. So she's going to be able to speak on, discuss how to advocate for yourself and hear some of the questions. The goal, as I stated earlier, is that we are here together learning about the problem. The goal is to create a solution. So with the questions asked here, this will help us develop those solutions. So we'll be going into our breakout group for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and reconvene. Oh, and just to know that the breakout groups are random. So you're going to be placed into a group. It's all done randomly.
All right, just hang in there. We're setting up the room. Everything going okay, Aziza?
Yes, alhamdulillah. You'll be in rooms in like 30 seconds, inshallah.
Yeah, all righty. I don't know how everybody else breakout room was, but I will tell you about ours. It was really good. And again, learning the importance of advocating for yourself. So what we're going to do now is we are going to have each facilitator to report back on some things that was spoke about in their group. We're going to give each facilitator about 5 minutes to do so, just to give us a brief on what was talked about in your group. So we'll start with Dr. Rashida.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. So some of the things that kind of I mentioned preconceptually, things like, you know, one of the 2 of the top conditions is hypertension and diabetes, and can affect as far as outcomes during pregnancy. So clearly, you know, it's trying to optimize these before pregnancy, and trying to get them as much in control and affecting everything that would help this natural process is going to help you in the long run. So getting your diet, you know, as far as optimized and starting to exercise and things like that will help that. And those, as far as the top 3 would be hypertension, diabetes, and obesity is considered like some of the risk factors for any woman going into pregnancy. Now, this country has different norms in regards to, you know, as far as weight and BMIs and stuff like that. That's not what I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to more of how are you optimizing your health and your diet. Another actually thing that was mentioned was even fibroids, having fibroids into pregnancy, going into a pregnancy, and how that could affect any future. So that, you know, that is making sure there was one, you know, as far as the participants who was told that because she had these fibroids, she would not be able to have a vaginal birth at all, and then she'd have to have a C-section automatically. One of the things I pointed out to my group is that, unfortunately, as I mentioned before, and I know my time is up, the problem with the U.S. As far as maternity care is that we like to medicalize it, and it's become a surgical specialty as opposed to the natural process. And so my participant was actually able to find a provider that was comfortable now with delivering her, even with her fibroid. So as we mentioned before, advocacy, and finding someone and asking as many questions as you can until you get to the point that you're comfortable and get the answer that makes sense, basically. And so, and one last thing, and it was premature birth. If you do have a history of premature birth, this is something that you and your midwife, if they're licensed to also to oversee your delivery, would be just mean earlier follow-up. And it's not necessarily something that precludes you to is optimizing your health, and it doesn't necessarily preclude you to future pregnancies.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rashida. That was awesome. Sister Christina.
Sure. So we talked about prenatal care. We also got into some of the preconception care as well, and you know, similarly, we talked about nutrition, and sort of one of the points that I brought up was looking at our cycles as sort of like a fifth vital sign. And if there are things going on with our cycles, like maybe it's not like there's no diagnosis of anything, but if somebody's having, you know, really heavy periods, long cycles, irregular cycles, you know, investigate that. So that, you know, you have all the information and you can address issues before they become sometimes like real serious, like fertility challenges. Same thing around fibroids, you know, talking with not just like medical providers, but seeking out, you can also talk to alternative kinds of providers who can provide a different set of resources around, you know, nutrition, different kinds of therapies that can be helpful. I mentioned acupuncture. So that, you know, you can lay the groundwork for a healthy pregnancy. We also talked about age, and we talked about mental health. And so I'll mention about age is sort of, you know, is your provider looking at you as an individual with all of sort of like the holistic aspects of your life? Because somebody who, for example, is having a first pregnancy with like assisted fertility therapies at an older age is in a different situation from somebody who might be having their third child and they happen to be, you know, 38 or 40. So, you know, is your provider looking at you as that individual versus like as a, you know, falling into just like a risk category? And then we talked about mental health as well, and sort of like when, you know, how do you kind of like look forward to the postpartum, or how do mental health issues like impact pregnancy? And I would say that, you know, it's so important to build your support team again, and that support team may include, you know, a mental health counselor or therapist. It may include, you know, sometimes you don't want to necessarily disclose everything to your birth team, but maybe, you know, you build a relationship with somebody where they know that there is, you know, like if you're someone with a trauma history, how can that person in that room with you hold space for all of you so that, you know, you can be seen through the process, even if not everybody like necessarily knows about it, or they can advocate for you with that knowledge in mind, because somebody with a trauma history is going to go through that experience potentially very differently from somebody who doesn't. So having the support that you need. And then sometimes it means like building a relationship with a therapist or a counselor in pregnancy, so that in the postpartum, if you know that you're at higher risk for, let's say, like postpartum depression, you have the relationship in place so that you can contact that person and they can potentially provide like phone support or video support, so that, you know, you don't have to go anywhere with your baby and you already know that person and they know who you are. So, yeah, I feel like there's all kinds of directions to take the conversation.
I agree 100%. Next we have Sister Manira.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. So we kind of reviewed, Sister Rosalind had already kind of had listed a number of different symptoms. So we kind of reviewed them, and because some of them can be some things that are common, right, during pregnancy. So fatigue, right, or swelling can sometimes happen, right? But when does it go from, you know, being sort of a normal part of pregnancy to being a concern? So we went through some of the different ones. So like for fatigue, we were saying, you know, it's normal to be tired when you're pregnant, particularly as you're further along and in that last trimester and you're carrying around the baby and your blood volume has doubled. But you know, if you're constantly kind of consistently feeling fatigued, even if you you know, maybe you've gotten a decent night's sleep, but you wake up still feeling extremely tired, then maybe that's something that you want to call and talk to your provider about. We also talked about some ways that you can advocate if you're getting some pushback from your provider. So, you know, if you call your provider and you have a concern and they're kind of brushing you off, then one thing you can do is ask your ask your provider to document in your records that you had expressed that you had a concern and you wanted some further testing and they declined it. Because they often don't want that accountability. And even if they still don't think it's anything, that 9 times out of 10, they're gonna go ahead and refer you just so it won't kind of come back on them down the road. We also had a person in the group who was talking about her experience with preeclampsia of you know, checking in terms of keeping on top of your visits and having your blood pressure taken. And then we specifically talked about, so she said, you know, her provider never actually told her what her blood pressure was. They were just like, oh, everything is fine, and kept going. And it was actually when she went to get a sonogram, they told her it was a concern. So we talked about, okay, so then also holding your provider accountable. If they're like, oh, everything's fine, you can say, okay, can you tell me what my blood pressure was? I'd like to keep it for my own records. So just kind of different ways to advocate for yourself like that.
Thank you so much, Sister Manera. All right, and lastly, we have Sister Rose.
All right, so like Munira said, we kind of went over the signs and symptoms as well, because I do know some of those things are common. So I won't go over those again because she did a great job explaining what's normal and what's not normal as far as fatigue and swelling and things like that. So one of the things that I was asked about was about the whole nurse changing thing in the hospital, because you know, people were like, wait, can you really do that? You absolutely can do that. And the key to doing that is to doing it respectfully. You know, calling a charge nurse in and making sure that when you're saying that I want another nurse, it's not just because she's getting on my nerves. It's, you know, because, you know, we just don't have the same philosophies as far as birth is concerned. You know, I would just really like a different experience with someone else, and they generally would. And I also advocate for asking for a nurse that looks like you. White patients ask for Black nurses, white nurses all the time. I have been, literally my assignment has changed multiple times because I work in a hospital with a lot of country folks, and they are completely blown away by walking Black hijabi in their room. And they ask for them, and they generally, almost every single time, they oblige. So don't be afraid to ask for someone that looks like you. Just ask. Another thing we talked about was breastfeeding. And I made it clear that I am not a breastfeeding expert by any means, but you know, the AFIA project maybe can have a session on just how to support breastfeeding, because as Black women, we, it's, especially if you give birth in a hospital, and I've seen it happen where just how they do not really, they assume that if you're Black, you're not going to breastfeed. So instead of asking the question of, are you going to breastfeed your baby? They'll ask, are you bottle feeding? And it's just these small things will just kind of build up to where you're like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm going to bottle feed. So it would be great for this organization to have a talk about how to support that, especially when you are in a hospital system that does not normalize Black breastfeeding. Someone asked a question about support when they really don't have support. So many of us are in situations where we up and we marry and we move out of the state, and then you're all by yourself, your family's someplace completely different. I advocated for making sure that you try to figure out a way to finance a doula. I have never seen a situation where a woman walks into the room with support where she is disrespected blatantly. Most of the time when things really go off the cuff, it's because you don't have someone in there to advocate for you. So, I advise that she does as much research as she possibly can. When she's reading, make sure she's writing things down. When you go into your office to speak to your provider, have your little notebook with you, have something written in that notebook. So that they know that when you're talking from a place of academia, and it's not just you Dr. Googling, that you actually know what you're talking about. And then we really got into the mental health aspect of postpartum care. I let them know that I advocate for it. When you're setting up that 6-week appointment, ask your physician or your provider to find someone for you or help you or give you resources to find a mental health care provider to speak to it as well not during that 6-week visit, but during that 6-week time frame, and possibly beyond that. Because a lot of times we kind of deal with the emotional things that happen postpartum, you're exhausted, and the problem is you just don't have someone to talk to that you are afraid is not going to judge you. So find someone to talk to. And I think that's it for us.
Amazing. All those questions are amazing. Actually, all those questions really, really help us move into the why we're even doing all of this. So before we continue, something that that everyone has mentioned, our panelists have mentioned, is the importance of speaking up, asking for support, and why you need support. And I thought this quote is amazing. Please stop calling Black women strong as a compliment. Strong is why our mortality rate in medicine is high. Strong is why our pain is not taken seriously. Strong is why there is less empathy for us. Strong is why we are put last in every movement because we can handle it. And we all know this speaks true to every aspect of our lives as to when the word strong is used against us, or to describe us, I should say. Then here, every single one of our stories speaks so true to this particular picture. A woman in Alabama walks in complaining of pain. The doctors said that she needed to lose weight, not even realizing she actually had a baby in her. And every single video spoke to what happened when the doctor did not listen to them, like how that caused trauma for them in the future. And this quote describes it perfectly. I would imagine if this was a Black woman, she might have died because of this due to medical discrimination we face. Not being taken seriously when we complain about physical issues, being ignored, or complaints of pain being minimized, because we believe to have higher pain tolerance, simply not given the highest or even the same level of service as, say, a white woman because of inherent bias against us. And every single story we heard today, we heard a level of inherent bias in their story. So with that said, you can do this while being on mute, or you can do this, you can take yourself off of me for 2 seconds, but I want everyone to say this along with me. I am a strong Black woman.
I am a strong Black woman.
I am a strong Black woman.
I'm a strong Black woman.
And I need support from time to time.
And I need support
from time to time.
I want this to be the affirmation that we continue and leave this webinar with, that we need support. I mean, honestly, I'm looking in the chat and I want to cry, because the vision that the AFIA project has is manifesting itself right here in the chat. I can't even begin to explain of how exciting this is, but the I need support time to time is very, very important, that we remember this as women, and we continue to make sure we ask for support from in every aspect. In our group alone, a sister shared that she is scared of giving birth alone because she doesn't have family around her. And right then and there, we were able to offer her assistance in terms of if she needs someone to talk to, we are here for her. So, with that said, why do we do all this? Like, we have this huge webinar. We did this webinar. We talked for almost 2 hours, and I swear to goodness, I could sit here until 5 o'clock if you let me. But why do we do this? And it's because we want to create a village. The goal is to create a village where we're able to share resources with each other and be able to go beyond this webinar and help our sisters out. So I will have Sister Fawzia explain what the Sister Village is.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome back. I'm in tears. I'm not just thinking about it or tearing out. I'm crying because subhanAllah, this is something that started as something just as a conversation, you know, and the validation of knowing that you're not the only one who feels this way. Other women feel this way, and just the importance of us really starting from somewhere. We need to respond to the issue at hand. So definitely a ton of things have been talked about. And we know that our work is cut out for us at the Afia Project. We hope to continue the conversation. To do our part in addressing maternal and child health disparities, we are proposing what we are terming the Sister Village program. Everything is still in the planning phases, so bear with us, but I'll share what we have so far. What we envision is a village of maternal guides and village aunties. Some people have actually used that reference, you know, when you talk to someone who helps you through the maternal phases and is really compassionate and helpful, you see them kind of like an auntie. So we want to create a village of maternal guides and village aunties. The maternal guides will be our experts. So in the village, we'll have the sisters who are women planning to become pregnant, who are currently pregnant, new mothers, seasoned mothers. Sometimes even if you've had so many births, you still need hand-holding at some, you know, to help you along that particular birth, because every single birth is different. We'll have the village aunties who would be seasoned mothers or grandmothers who can help coach village sisters along on their maternal health journey. And then the maternal guides, like I mentioned, would be our experts, like the medical doctors, midwives, doulas, public health practitioners, and researchers to inform, to give us information and help guide us through. The Afia Project, we're hoping will have resources. We'll be populating our maternal child health page with resources of maternal child health, specifically geared towards Black African-American women. The vision of the Sister Village is to eliminate racial disparities in maternal child health. That's a huge vision, but we have to start from somewhere. We have to think big. The aim, our specific aim, is to provide maternal support and mentorship. We want to be able to help us help women advocate for their health. That was a word, I had to write it down, that was mentioned by so many speakers, so many of those who shared their birth story. We need to be able to advocate for our health, advocate for our well-being, and also to help us restore dignity. I'm really looking forward to your work, Sister Rose, because that's, you know, maternal disrespect is a huge issue, and it can be very debilitating and something that can break a woman, especially when you're at that in that vulnerable position of giving birth. Okay, so this is kind of like the graphic we put together. The depiction of what we're proposing. If you're interested in being a village sister and being a village auntie or even a maternal guide, please visit our website and complete a brief questionnaire. So on the landing page, the home page, there's going to be a button that says maternal, I think maternal resources or something like that, and I can put the link in the chat box. So complete that, and we'll brainstorm some more and see and contact you and be in contact and let you know how we're going to proceed with this idea that we have. It's a great idea. We don't necessarily have funding for it, but we're hoping we can pull together help amongst ourselves. We have a community of Muslim women or Black women with all this expertise. We should be able to help each other out in that way. So our website is www.theafiaproject.org. We're hope to make, this is going to be a journey. It's not going to be a quick sprint through, one particular issue and that's it. We want to go from the preconception phases, when you're just thinking about being pregnant, knowing your health history and things like that we've covered already. What puts you at risk? Call your parents, encouraging individuals to learn about their background, what might put you at risk for certain things throughout your pregnancy journey. The conception phases, you've just gotten pregnant, now what do you do? The pregnancy phases, of course, the signs for preeclampsia, high blood pressure, digestion of diabetes, of that nature. And also the postpartum, which typically gets left out a lot. We really need to go back to adding that into the stages of pregnancy because it really is part and parcel of it. So the hope is to be able to support women through all those phases of their pregnancy in a culturally competent manner. We know that not everything is going to be cookie cutter, especially for us women, Black women. We have our own specific cultural considerations, things, or even religious considerations that we need to take to heart. Okay, I'm done crying. And now let's go back to our giveaway. So we do have someone in mind that we have selected for the giveaway. I have, and then can you come back on, turn on your video, Ramatulai? I don't know if
Yes.
you have
I'm coming. Can you hear me?
Let me stop sharing.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
We have Ruki, R-U-K-I. Are you here, Ruki?
Yay, Ruki! She's there. Can
so
she
you get the package?
Yay, Ruki! Ruki has won herself an awesome Abiyamo Mommy Bright
Thank
Relax
you.
box. Yay!
So excited. Thank you.
No problem.
Can you send us your email address in the chat box? You can send it directly to the Afia Project, and then I'll get back in touch with you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And I just wanted to add to that I will be launching Abiyamo's box in October. So everyone that's here on the email will definitely be receiving an email about that launch and when that will happen. Congratulations again, Ruki.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. So we've come to an end. This is so hard to end because I have enjoyed myself and learned so much. And we have created this village. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. This is not what I thought at the beginning of our presentation. I did not know by the end that this village would have happened without us even saying it. Like, alhamdulillah for that. To keep in touch with us, you can definitely email us. You can go to our website, hit us up on WhatsApp if you have any questions, future projects. If you would like to talk to our panelists, I want to first, before I continue to our Instagram, thank every single one of our panelists. I found Sister Christina and Sister Munira via Google. Sister Christina actually said, you need to hit up Sister Munira. And and they were both so on board immediately. And that's a blessing to see people in the community who are looking to help us tackle the maternal health epidemic in our country. And I want to thank every single one of our panelists, Dr. Rashida and Sister Rose. Thank you so much for taking time out on Sunday to help us out with this and to talk. And I'm hoping in the future we will see more of you within our village. We also have an Instagram page. As we stated earlier, we went live on Facebook. So if you want to watch this again, share with friends, it will be on Facebook. And you can also find us on YouTube.
Okay. I'm at a loss for words. Again, I'm echoing everything Ramatulai said. Thank you so much to the panelists. This was a dream come true, and it's really formulating. We're just getting started. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and I hope everyone can continue to stay on board. Now we do quite a few different things at the AFIA Project. One of our upcoming events, it's not necessarily maternal-child related, but it's related to kids. We're launching the Ready Set Launch back to school program. This school year is going to be quite challenging. I homeschool my kids, but I can already feel it, even for them, because they're not able to do the regular things that they're able to do. They're not able to socialize as much. Well, the After Project is partnering with the Isaac Foundation and SciTech to You, which is a nonprofit as well. Please check them out. It's a STEM-based nonprofit. We are going to be giving virtual homework and tutoring support to young kids in elementary, middle, and high school. We're going to have after-school clubs, which is a great way for the kids to be able to interact with each other virtually in a safe manner, at least while outside is still closed down, as I say it. And also we're gonna have STEM activities be a major part of this school year. So please check us out, check out our website, theafiaproject.org. We're really excited and we look forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you so much. And panelists, if you guys can just put in your email addresses in the chat box. It looks like a lot of individuals are asking for your contact information. They can also get it on the website, but just to get it out there really quickly, that would be great.